I'm Julia Davis, a film major who stumbled into the business world with no experience in 2006. I was able to fail enough to learn how to run a 7-figure business and have provided consulting services to over 200 individually owned companies. Through this podcast, I hope to provide some perspective on the growth and grit it takes to accomplish big goals and share some hard lessons I've had to learn along the way. Today on Growth and Grit, we're going to talk about self-employment. And the left side of the cash flow quadrant, there's employee, which means you work for somebody else or you exchange time for money. And there's self-employment, which means you are the job. Essentially, you are the one generating all the income for your situation. It might be that you're the bookkeeper and you're the accountant and you're the person that does all the work and does all the ads. And today we're going to talk to Michelle Tremblay, who's been self-employed for 15 years on that side of the cash flow quadrant. So we can learn a little bit more about self-employment and kind of see the growth and some of the challenges and some of the things she wishes she would have known prior to that industry. So if you're on that track currently, or maybe you'll see some of the things you're doing as a business owner that are leading more towards self-employed and realizing, hey, these are some changes I need to make. Or maybe you'll look at it and say, hey, this is for me. I love self-employment. This is what I want to do. But either way, I think that understanding what it takes and the journey that self-employment leads you to is really important for people to know. So we're gonna ask Michelle Tremblay some questions. First, starting with the fact that she grew up in a household where her dad was in real estate and she saw him be self-employed. So Michelle, what was that like, watching your dad, build a real estate business from the ground up and living that self-employed life while you grew up?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think real estate's its own kind of niche thing in a lot of ways, right? It's a little different than the type of industry that I'm in. I think as a dad, a lot of the times dads are off on business trips and they're working their typical 9 to 5s and mom is picking you up from school. I had the luxury of being able to have my dad coach all of my sports teams. So he coached every young softball team, every young soccer team, everything, right? But on the flip side of that, there was never a time we went on a vacation where his cell phone was not glued to his ear or his car phone wasn't going off, right? I'm a millennial. His car phone wasn't going off in the car on the way to a practice. And there wasn't a night of the week. We sat down and had dinner as a family every single night after all of my practices. Every night. There was not a single night where my dad didn't say, the closing ceremony was, all right, I'm headed out to the office. We had a little guest house in the back that was his office. And every night after we were done eating, prioritizing the family time, he went out and worked for another 3 or 4 hours and burned the midnight oil. And it's funny now because he was born in 54. I was an art major. Do the math on that. However old he is, when he comes to town to visit me, the very first thing he does is pull out his laptop. And of course, again, knowing his age, he puts his little mouse pad out there with his little clickable mouse pad that he's had for years. The picture is like of my son that got made for him years ago, right?
Yeah.
And he sets up shop because as a self-employed person, your ability to retire with, like my husband, who's a firefighter, with a pension and with all of these great, sexy additives that allow you to have that long-term freedom is not there. So, he's in his, 70s, 60s, 70s at this point and still self-employed.
Yeah.
So grind is real. I remember being at church and one time they asked us to go around in a circle and I think I was like 12. And they asked us the question, if you could take 2 characteristics from your parents and you could put them into you or into your children, what would those 2 characteristics be? Right. And so at like 12 years old, all the kids go around and they're like, kind, loving, nice. Right. And I'm like, I would take my dad's work ethic. And it is the only variable, the only thing that was different in that circle. Right. And I just remember at a very, very young age, understanding what that looked like, understanding what that grind meant. There was not a ton of no one's patting you on the back, right, as a self-employed person. And it was very clear that that was the case for him. He was constantly looking for the next sale. He was constantly grinding. So there's a level of instability where we knew in the mortgage industry, there's high highs and low lows. Were we shopping at Walmart or were we shopping at Nordstrom?
Yeah.
So even at a young age, you have this thermostat and this threshold for understanding what the overall economics and finances of things were. Whether you understood them rationally or not, the feeling was definitely there.
Yeah. And do you think that, and this is just a personal question, but I know that like you played college sports, your dad played college sports, ended up playing in the NFL. Do you feel like people that come from an athletic background look for more self-employment type of opportunity? Or like, it's interesting that like both of you guys, and I see that with a lot of like D1 athletes, they go into like more of a self-employment and they have a really hard time even building teams sometimes because they're so good at self-development and what they do, but they maybe don't even want to rely on a team because they've seen that play out in different circumstances.
You know, it's interesting because I completely agree with you. There are a lot of athletes that are extremely motivated, right? And you start to get your bucket filled growing up from this level of achievement and accomplishment. And you get this adrenaline rush and this hit every time you have a successful interaction or you write a great ad or you pick up a client or you close a sale. And I think that that's that game time scenario type of mentality. Turning 40 this year, I do feel like the way that I'm kind of turning and parenting my kids a little bit when it comes to sports, it is a little bit different. I think hindsight's always kind of 2020. I think our society has changed a little bit in making sure that we're staying grounded and that our nervous systems stay really balanced. I don't think it's sustainable to have that adrenaline constantly coursing through your veins. Only now am I realizing that, right? After being, living that life for so many years. But it's very ironic how we all end up in these self-employment positions, because when you think about it, you're creating your own system. You don't have a coach. You're playing all the positions. Yeah. Yes, you're winning and losing, but you don't have cheerleaders. You don't have anyone that's like patting you on the back or saying great job, right? It's just you. So sure, I was a team captain and I could lead a team and lead a group of people, but there's a strong difference between that and someone who is able to easily create structures, right? That would be as if I were an NFL coach, right? If I were a Division I coach. My husband was a Division I football coach for years prior to becoming a firefighter. He is unbelievable at developing systems. He's unbelievable at being able to execute a game plan. He was a coach. As a player for so many years, we are given all the direction. Well, what happens a decade in when the direction is gone and it's just you?
Yeah.
We are the directors of our own life. We're the directors of our household, right? I'm a mom of 3. That gets busy. But I don't have anybody that's like handing me water on the sideline saying, hey, by the way, you haven't drank water today. You haven't eaten lunch today. Have you peed today? Right? But it's like, I only have so many hours in a day and I've got to grind that out. So I do think it's a little bit ironic the way that all of these, I think we strive to find success and to be the best at what we do. And I think we're emotional people. Athletes generally are very emotional, right?
Yeah.
You put a lot into it, you practice really well, you get a lot out of it. And that is a strong asset to our character. And it can also be our demise. It can also be our greatest downfall at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Is that
for sure.
need for constant connection, attention in that regard. But yeah, very interesting that we all end up in this kind of scenario.
Yeah. I just think it's kind of ironic, right? It's just kind of
yeah, it's very ironic.
I didn't think
right.
of it.
I think I said to you the other day, it's like you're the one saying to yourself, no one cares, work harder, right? I remember having that conversation with my dad and kind of I think I was working 3 jobs at the time and I was a single mom and I was really, really struggling. And I called him and was like, hey, like, what am I going to do here? And I'm not sure if we can cuss on this podcast. We'll probably be bleating out here, but he's like, you fucking get up and you go to work.
Yeah.
And I was like, so not even a day to feel sorry for myself here. It was like, nope. And I'm like, cool. Next day, start self-employed the next day. It was the fastest way for me to get from point A to point Z and to show success because I can bet on myself. I can bet on my work ethic. I'm not the
Yeah.
smartest in the room. I'm not the most organized in the room. I don't have the best systems, but I can trust me and I can trust that I'm the hardest worker in the group. It's all I got.
How long did it
Right.
take you to become like an expert level at what you're doing? Like how many years of like learning curve did it take you to feel like, okay, I've really got this down?
I don't think you ever really feel that way, right? I think that that's keeping yourself on your toes is what really makes you great, is constantly being open to feedback. I've never been someone who sits well in a situation of winning or losing, right? I hate to lose more than I love to win, so I never really celebrate my wins in that regard. There's no part of me that's sitting here saying I'm the best. There's always something more that I can learn. There's always something more that I can do. I'm very really understanding of that there's always someone that's working harder. My dad used to always tell us, he's like, he was training in college and playing football and all the things. He used to wake up at 1 a.m. every morning and run this huge conditioning test that they had to do. And then sometimes he'd wake up at 3 a.m. and do it. Sometimes he'd wake up at 4 a.m. and do it. And he would tell us the story. And really the reasoning was because he knew no one else was running the conditioning test at that time, so it gave him a leg up.
Yeah. Just doing it.
So when you think about it, I mean, when that's how you're raised, it's strange for my husband why I'm working at 3 o'clock in the morning and why I'm betting on myself and why I'm burning the candle at both ends. But it's what I know. It's in my soul. It's in my cellular DNA that is just what happens. You just work harder. So I think his dad has that too, right? His dad, I think, ran track at UConn and built a law firm from scratch, a very successful law firm. So also self-employed, also understood the grind. He was gone at 5 a.m. and didn't get home until midnight every single day for years, building practice, building his firm. So I think for Paul, now as a firefighter, he's kind of like, I check in, I check out. He doesn't necessarily understand that. As a Division I football coach, he slept at the office every day,
Right.
most days during season. So like,
And just to hit on that for a second.
Yeah.
I think people look at coaching as like a job you want to have, but they make almost no money. Like, let's talk about that. I think like when I asked you, it was like 15 grand a year or like some type of.
So this is a really common misconception. And I'll be honest, I think football coaching is a fascinating industry. I mean, they do all of those shows on all the Netflix and things and following the teams behind the scenes during training camp. And the real story are these coaches. The real story are these guys that are waking up every single morning. So when there's weights and conditioning for the players at 5 a.m. because they need to get that in before they go to class as a Division I athlete, right? We used to do strength and conditioning at 5 a.m. I didn't show up because I wanted to be there. I showed up because I had a team that was relying on me to be there.
Right.
So, right, the coaches have to be there too. So they're the first ones there in the morning. Then you've got, not only are you game planning for the game that's coming up, you're watching film, you're also coaching these men and developing them as humans. When they come in, your door is open. Then you're dealing with the politics of, the actual university, the school. Oh, and don't forget, you still have to recruit for the next year, right? So then as soon as your season's over, you're going and you're on the road and you're recruiting.
Yep.
So as a football coach, you start off and you're working usually as like a GA, like a grad assistant at the very, very lowly level. You're probably making a stipend of like $5,000 a year. And then they'll give you the opportunity to work the summer football camps to make like another $5,000 a year. Right.
So how does anyone ever do it? Like they have to just like, honestly, they have to just super love it. Right. That's number one. Like they have to have a passion for it, hands down, which probably weeds out a lot of people who are doing it for money.
100%. Oh,
right.
Wait, let's not forget, Julia, that we also have to move every year.
Yeah.
Or 2 years if you're lucky. Right. So even if you have a contract because you've now been in the industry for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, Paul ended at Arizona State. Like he was making a decent salary, but by decent, I mean like still under 100 grand and
Yeah.
working, Lord knows how many hours he was working. Once you get to that point, when your head coach gets fired, you all basically get fired. Very rarely are you retained. Maybe a couple of guys are retained by the new coaches coming in, but someone can have a 10-year contract worth millions and millions and millions of dollars and still get fired. They still pay out that guy. Good for him, right? Good for that head coach. Good for that 0.001% of people who end up in a head coaching role in the NFL or as a Division I athlete or a Division I coach.
Yeah.
But you're moving. You're picking up and you're moving. So left Arizona State, Todd Graham gets fired. They all go, he gets a job offer at Georgia. So it's like, we're moving to Georgia, right? Like that's the game plan. And at a certain point, he was just like, what am I doing? Is this what my life is going to look like forever? Now, as a football coach, yes, he loved it, but he had a wife and we had a kid. And we really understood that if we were going to have more children, that he didn't want to be the dad that wasn't present.
Right.
So he had to make a choice and make a sacrifice for something that he really loved. And let me tell you, there are conversations where he regrets that choice as he sees his peers who have moved probably a dozen times over the last 10 years, if more or less. Moms are picking up, kids are finishing high school because they went from Texas and now they're out of Boston College. And they had a great game this weekend, by the way. You know, go Eagles. We love the Browns that are out there. But you know, Amber Brown, she's literally picking up her entire family, trying to figure it all out on her own. So she can't hold down a full-time job.
Right.
They're just following Ray wherever he needs to go. And that's the goal. That's the mission. Right. So we didn't have the ability to constantly keep moving. So I was like, well, you can move and we'll stay here. We'll have a long distance relationship. Doesn't mean we can't have more kids. Like I'm happy to raise them. But the amount of time, the gap between the time in which we hoped he would be able to, where he was at financially and career-wise, the gap between that and where we hoped he would end up financially and career-wise,
Too big.
that wasn't enough for us to then be able to say, I don't have to work during that time so that we can still continue that growth and continue our family life plans, that the timing wouldn't have added up there. So it was a sacrifice that had to be made. And so again, you know, he looked at his options, became a firefighter, loves his job. It's definitely that team atmosphere, right? It's definitely checks the boxes as an athlete as to what you really want, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of those things. So yeah, that's kind of where we ended up. But coaching is very 100 hours a week. You get a couple weeks off here and there. If you go to a bowl game, that's a plus, right? You get to like the bowl game. You go to the bowl game in Hawaii. They take the wives. That's sweet of them, you know?
Least they could do. Yeah.
You know?
It's interesting. I think I heard something once about parents, that both working parents, right? Where you have two people in a household that have full-time jobs. And whether it's self-employed, running business, whatever it is, it's like one person who's like super committed and making great money or like needs to just put forth a ton of intensity and grind and grit and whatever, needs to put forth a ton of that. The other person has to sometimes be like, okay, I'll be the person that picks up kids and picks up this and does this and makes the lunches and does this. And then it might flip, right? And then 2 years later, it's the other spouse that needs to really invest the time and do that. And then the other one can kind of pick up the slack on what's going on. But I think it's like a true balance, right? It's just, everyone's careers in different places. Sometimes your significant other needs to do the work and you got to pick up the slack and vice versa. And I think like I struggle with that personally because I feel like it always felt like a mom's job to do everything, which I think self-employment in women is very, very hard for this reason with kids, because you have a certain level of guilt if you can't be there for your kid, right? Or they're like, hey, it's read to me day and you can't go because you've got something going on and everyone else's mom can go. And it's, I think that sometimes that level of guilt is like really weighs really, really heavy. So like what tip do you have for other working moms that are self-employed or on this journey that have kids that feel that, and maybe their significant other is awesome, or maybe it's not even in the picture at all. What advice do you have for that type of person that's like, I feel overwhelmed and I know I have to do this to make money for my family, but then I'm living with this other, you know, guilt.
Yeah, I think there's a real lack of balance for us as moms and entrepreneurs, as moms and self-employed people. There really is not a great balance. And, we have flexibility, we just don't have freedom. So I don't make passive income. If I'm out and volunteering at my child's school, my business is not operating, right? So it becomes a balance, but we can have, again, another thing my dad used to tell me all the time was, listen, you can have anything you want. You just can't have everything you want, right? So you kind of have to pick your lane in a sense. And it's impossible for us to sit here and say, I can be the best at both. The guilt is constant. It will never go away. The sooner that you're able to really identify that feeling, hi, I'm feeling guilty. Hi, I'm Michelle. I feel guilty in this moment because I can't be two places at once. Identifying that within ourselves and being able to leave and give ourselves grace and space to hold that emotion, because that emotion isn't going anywhere. I fought that emotion for years and years and years. And you ended up pouring from an empty cup. Your cup is not filled because you're constantly going different places, and that's not sustainable.
Why do you think there's such a struggle with asking for help? Because I feel like people, people will help you. Like I've got great mom friends that step in and help me all the time, that pick up my kid. Like one of them's picking up my daughter from school today and taking her to their house because I've got a thing I got to do. So it's like, I think there is support out there. There is an ability to say, hey, I need help. And you know what? As a parent, when someone asks me for help, I'm happy to help them. I'm like, yes, let me help you. And I think, I don't know why this is, but like, why do you think, and even in the business world, like business owners, people in general, self-employed people, they just have such a stigma against asking for help. Like, why?
I think there's a couple of things behind that. I think the first thing is that we were the first generation, our millennial generation, you and I, our age, we're in that 40 category. That we were the first generation where they kept telling us as women, you can have it all. You can be it all. You can be a stay-at-home mom and you can have a career. Like you can do it all. But there was no one putting the path out there, Julia. There was no one that was doing both actionably well. It was more of like, this is what we talk about. This is what you can be doing. This is what you could be doing. Like the world is your oyster. Like go, take it, run with it. I think we've also keep in mind that financially, most households need dual working incomes today, especially, inflation, et cetera. That wasn't the case when we were growing up. When we were growing up, there wasn't there was more of a multi-generational raising of children, right? That is not existent in my life, right? Our family lives out of state. We don't have any of that. So that's not really there, right? And I think that that's kind of what that maybe perhaps could have been based on. I think life is expensive. Kids are expensive. Having a nanny would be great, but it's not in the budget for my husband and myself. Just isn't there. Never has been able to be there. So it's not something that we can rely on. I think as my kids get older, I think you start to become a little bit more trusting in asking for help. Your friends become your family. You create a community. They become more of a safe place for you. You have a little bit more ability to ask for help. But I think that the biggest thing is it's the want, right? It's the want to receive that help. I don't want to receive the help. I don't like the answer of saying I can't be in two places at once. I'm an athlete. I'm competitive. Like, why can't I just split myself in half, right? It's admitting failure. It's admitting weakness. And I think that that's something that I'm working on, right? Or at least I'm working on with my therapist, because that's supposed to for an hour a week. Is her trying to tell me that I need to fill my bucket before other people.
I need to have a hidden camera on you in therapy being like, yeah. And then like checking your phone.
Exactly. Me hearing it go off and being like twitching little, knowing somebody is ruining.
You're like, sorry, just a minute.
1 second. It's fine. We're good. It's good. She talks about it, right? But she talks a lot about the fact that I am just conditioned to be a doer and thinking I need to do it all myself. And I have a husband that's a task-oriented guy. You give that man a checklist and it is like fire, right? Boom, 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 boom. It's completely done. The problem is like, who's receiving the emails to generate that checklist? Who's the person who's forecasting the fact that we do need soccer cleats in order to play soccer, right? Who's the person who's forecasting, as a self-employed person, I'm responsible to reach out to forecast for my clients, right? So there's an invisible load that never goes away, where you're constantly thinking, you're constantly being pulled in one direction or another, and we're not giving ourselves the space to take care of ourselves, to fill our bucket. If there was a hidden camera on me, Julia, for the entire day, I am convinced people would call authorities in some way or another. Like,
you're not eating anything. Yeah.
She needs help. Like, she's gone. I mean, my to-do list is 3 pages long. So far today, it's 11:44 my time. Fun fact, 44 is my lucky number. It was my dad's football number, so that's very poignant. But I have 3 pages of to-dos that have been checked off. Servicing 23 different clients and customers, servicing my kids with lunches this morning and all of these things, right? My husband did take them to school today. He's picking them up from school today. It's my favorite part of the day. It feels like when I get to pick my kids up from school. So I do have to mourn that loss on the days where I'm just too busy to be able to do that. A lot of the days as a self-employed person, I can do that, right? But that 30-minute swing of me getting into the preschool parking lot pickup and getting the best parking spot, and then my 15-year-old comes from high school because they're all on the same campus and walks in, tries to scare me in the car. We chat for 5 minutes, then we go and we pick up Willa because, of course, there's staggered release times for traffic purposes.
Right.
We pull out, right? Like, it's my favorite time of the day, sitting in the car. It's when your kids open up to you the most,
right?
When they're excited to see you. I really mourn that loss. So the days that I am able to do those pickups. It's not that I'm able to because I have the freedom to do that. I have the flexibility to do it, but I don't have the freedom to do it. Freedom would mean that I can go still make money and have zero issue with conscience, right? Like, but the flexibility, what that does is, sure, yes, I can go and pick my kids up from school and drop them off every single day. Am I on a call during that time? Probably. Am I needing to take that 30 minutes in the morning or 30 minutes in the afternoon and put those and tack those on to the end of my day? And when I put my kids to bed, I'm working for 4 to 6 more hours? Yes.
So what advice do you have for people? Because I don't know if you know this, but the average in the 60s, self-employed people typically lasted somewhere between 25 to 30 years, right? Now, today, the average...
They died?
No. Retiring, right? Before, just in general, retirement. Now, today, flash forward 2024, these are real stats. It's 21 years. So it's gone down significantly. I think part of it's because of community, right? Like if you own a local shop, the other local shop owners kind of step in and help you out, or maybe do something, I don't know. Or maybe the jobs have just become more intense and extensive because of cell phones, or you can get contacted at all hours of the day and night, where if you were an electrician back in the 50s, like no one could reach you. So maybe you had more stamina for longer periods of time, but 21 years is the number. So how do you, now you've done this for 15 years, how do you save up enough money to be able to retire at the end of that self-employment lifespan?
You don't.
There's got to be a way, no?
Sure. I'm sure there's a way. I'm sure that somebody who has a financial background, who at a very young age in their self-employment career had the advice, the wherewithal, the maturity at 22 years old, the systems in place, the community rallying around you. I made a bad investment. Let's see. I had a good year. Must have been 2010, 2011. And I took this like lifetime worth of savings. I was like addicted to saving this money, and I put it with an investor, put it with an investment company. Amazing, wonderful. I feel so good about this. It doesn't even exist anymore. Like, this is going to be my long-term retirement. Fast forward 10 years. My husband actually has a finance background. So he actually was, prior to football coaching, he's lived a lot of lives at this point. Prior to football coaching, he was in investments, finances, et cetera. So we're married. He knows I have this account. I'm like stuck with this financial advisor because I'm like, oh, my friends use them and this, that, or the other. Fast forward, we go, we're looking at the money. We're looking, hey, we have 2 additional kids. We might need to add on to our house, right? We're kind of priced out of our neighborhood, but we could add on. And we realized my money had made no money on itself in the 10 years that it was there. The amount of money that I essentially lost on that money was substantial. And I didn't have enough knowledge. They don't teach you the stock market. They don't teach you, brokerage accounts and all of these things when you're in college, again, as an art major, right? I'm a creative. So that wasn't my wheelhouse. It is my husband's wheelhouse. And he's dissecting it and realizing that I kind of had a fucked up situation, right? With like a long-term deal, whatever. He pulls my money. We put it with a financial advisor that we really love, who did us a favor, right? Because I wasn't giving enough money to what this guy manages. He's like manages all of these amazing people, but he's one of the best in the country, best in the world. His dad comes from his dad. He got his, MBA at NYU and worked on Wall Street and all that stuff. And since then, my money has made 15%, 20% year to year. But for 10 years, that $120,000 or whatever it was like my life savings, it felt like, made no money. Could have, should have, would have been, right? And you don't sit with those things, but you realize, hey, like mistakes happen.
Right.
We're not perfect at everything. No one has a ton of knowledge coming out of college or high school or where whatever your path is. Whenever you really get into the world, there isn't really a blueprint for how to financially save and to scale and to retire as a self-employed individual.
Right.
There's no class. Now there's some master classes, right? I think social media, like you mentioned earlier, social media can be a benefit in a lot of ways, right? It can be a burden, but it can be a benefit. The benefit is now I could probably look up a lot about where to invest my money, and probably should have invested into real estate 15 years ago. It was low in Arizona. Probably should have invested it into a laundromat and into, whatever other businesses are really trending right now to invest into. I could have made a lot of different decisions, but there are master classes that you can take on, this for dummies. But it wasn't, as a self-employed individual, like you mentioned earlier, I am my own bookkeeper. I'm my own everything. I do have an accountant that helps with the tax side of things at the end of the year, because that's just me beyond my pay grade. But there isn't someone that's saying, hey, by the way, Michelle, have you looked into retirement? Especially my dad. My dad and my father-in-law, they probably, we grew up upper middle class, right? There were probably years where they made close to $1 million a year. We're talking, this is like the 90s, right? And they both are still working to this day. Because they're first generation. So my father-in-law is self-built. My dad is self-built. They were first generation badass motherfuckers, right? Like they built families, like they worked their asses off. They built this big thing. But they were first generation. So their money comes in, money goes out, money comes in, money goes out. There wasn't, and we grew up in San Diego. This is not middle America. I saw something the other day about the average savings per state, and it was all middle America had the best savings rates. And then like all around the outsides were like bright red, means like no savings compared to their income ratio.
Because how can you? It's so expensive, right?
Right. So this middle America, they're the savers.
Yeah.
My parents weren't savers. So I never had that education either as to where to save or how to save. So you try your best. But I talked to my sister the other day, also self-employed. She's a couple of years older than me. And she's like, I pretty much understand that I'm going to work until the day that I die, just like dad. It's a very sad thought. She's not happy in what she does, but it's her reality. I talked to my sister-in-law. So my sister works for my dad with my dad. My sister-in-law works with my father-in-law for my father-in-law, or did for years. So she got to the point where she's like, she was under the same impression. She's like, I'm going to work until the day I die, just like my dad. And a couple of years ago, she's a brilliant attorney. And a couple of years ago, she decided to go and take a role for the state. So she's now the district attorney, the big lawyer that does all of this stuff, Surgeon General, something like that for the state of California, right? She's brilliant. She took the job for the pension. So she makes about a quarter of what she did. But the way she talks about her pension is as if she has won the lottery.
Do you think that people who don't want to take that route, or like want to stay self-employed and want the control and the flexibility, good advice for them would be, hey, learn about finance, or hire somebody that's smart about finances, or learn about that, take some classes, whatever, early in your career, so you can start socking
Yeah.
away 10, 20 grand a year if you can, because if you can do that for 30 years, you're done. Like you're set,
Yeah.
right? So you don't
Yeah.
have
I
to have
think there
someone
has to be
manage
a
it for
level of
you.
trust too,
Yeah.
right? So I do think that you have to find the right circle. You have to find the right people.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely foundational and something that if I could roll back the clock, I would absolutely do. It's
Yeah.
something I talk to kids about all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So while I am good with money in terms of, saving, working on a budget, whatever it might be, there's so much more than that. It's so much bigger than that. It's finding a way to make your money make money. It's finding a way to retire. It's finding a way to make more of a passive income, to have
Right.
multiple streams of income would be another strong piece of feedback. Instead of just putting all of my time, if I put all the time that I put into my current company, building it, the nights, the tears, the sweat, these sleepless nights just from pure anxiety, thinking fear of loss, thinking that the bottom's going to fall out tomorrow. If I were to put all that time and energy and effort into diversifying myself a little bit more,
Yeah.
right? So like I'm going to get into real estate. I'm going to put a little bit into this. I'm going to put a little bit into this. I'm going to put a little bit into this. I'd probably be in a better situation than I am today, where I'm like, at what point, if this was a loss, if I lost everything tomorrow, what do I have to show for it?
Yeah.
You're working in corporate America, you've got maybe a reputation, maybe you've got like your name on a plaque, right?
Yeah. Or
Whatever.
yeah, sometimes they get laid off. So that's pretty rough too,
That's
right?
negative, right?
That happens.
Maybe you get your name on a little plaque.
Yeah.
I talk to my oldest sometimes and I'm like, somebody built that bridge. That's a job. A bridge builder. Like, you
Yeah.
always drive by that bridge and be like, I built that bridge. Like, is that your legacy? What is your legacy? I don't know. But as a self-employed individual, my kids won't take over my company. It'll start and die with me. I'm self-employed. I'm not building a business. I'm not a business owner in that regard. I'm self-employed.
What's
So I've
something you
had
wish you
people
knew?
me not, but they come, they go. It's not a machine.
Yeah. What's something that you wish you knew? Like if you could go back 15 years ago to when you first started this. And you've seen like massive years of success, massive years of struggle. I think it's just like the self-employment track is a major roller coaster. It's dependent like COVID, right? When that happened, all business stopped, no cash flow coming in.
That year, yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember.
Not a dollar of income.
Yeah.
And
It's rough. So it's like that happens a lot, for self-employed people, or one bad review, right? Like if you're an electrician and you electrocute somebody, then you're like, well, now I have to find a whole new job and a whole new career and all new clients and all new things, right? So it's like sometimes there's a little bit of, obviously you build on reputation and things like that, but what's something you wish you would have known? Like we can rewind the clock 15 years ago, you're just starting off. What would you tell Michelle 15 years ago, starting in this industry? What advice would you give to that person?
I think to stay true to myself. I think a lot of the times we get really wrapped up into being someone else and looking to be who someone else might want you to be. And I think sometimes to find success, we sell our soul a little bit, right? We sacrifice who we are as people. It's one of the things I actually respect about you the most, just in life, obviously, in business and otherwise. I feel like you've always been very authentically yourself. I think that it translates from your personal life into your business life and into the way you were raised and all these things. I think it's very rare and unique. It's hard to sometimes read through the bullshit, but if you can find the right people and you can create a team behind you, constant coaching, constant development, constant mentorship. I think finding a mentor early on that's in the exact place that you are, I think that would be something I could have done earlier. It's a good question. I haven't really thought much about what I would do differently other than creating more of a balance. I think I really, when you pick up that first call at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., sometimes 4 a.m., because again, if I'm Pacific time zone, I've got a client on the East Coast at 7 a.m., I pick up the phone at 4 a.m. I have now officially made that standard practice, right? I've blurred that boundary. I no longer have the boundary of like, ooh, that's not an appropriate time to be calling. No longer there. when I took those calls at midnight, at 1 a.m., at 2 a.m., there's no boundary anymore. So I think creating, you put out what you want to receive, right? And if I don't create that boundary for myself, I'm always going to feel like I have not done enough or that I'm letting someone down. Again, what drives me to be great, but also just a natural negative of being self-employed.
I think it's hard to have a boundary when you don't have a staff, right? Because who else is going to answer that phone call? Like, it has to be you. But if you have a team of people, someone else can be on the East Coast answering that 7 a.m. phone call, right? If you have an East Coast person and a Central Time Zone person and a West Coast person, and all three of them work for you, then now you can put that boundary in place. But when you have nobody, it has to be you, right? So it's just
reminder, that's someone who's a really good coach, right? But not everyone is built to be a good coach.
It's true.
I was a fucking good athlete. Like, I was an unbelievable athlete, elite, but I wasn't a coach. So if you don't have the patience to deal with that person on the East Coast being like, cough, cough, I'm so sorry, I'm sick today, and the 3 plans that I had are now completely foiled, right? To me, that is more stressful, managing other people's feelings and stresses and schedules, etc., than it is for me to just get up and do the work myself.
Yeah, that's kind of
That's how my
push-pull, right?
My body operate. But I beyond admire those people who are system-oriented, and they are more of the work smarter, not harder category. I am of the work harder category. Yeah. Always have been. It's just my nature. I'm not that smart, but I'll outwork you. It's all I've got. Truly, it's all I've got. And so I lean into that. But you're right. Yeah. I admire the people who can have the systems and have all of the things, and you're putting in a report for this. And if there's a report for the report, for the report, for the report, that's not me. I am like a face-to-face. I am old school. I would have done very great as like the first female real estate agent of the 50s, right? Shaking hands, interacting, like, it would have been great. But no, in today's day and age, it's a report for everything. Everyone needs a report for something. And that's just not the way I operate. Like, I am me, and I'm the secret sauce, which is a positive and a negative.
Right. Okay. That's great. I think that's great content. I think it's good for people to know and to see like a real side of, sometimes you just see the dollars and you're like, whoa, this person must be incredibly organized and happy and all these things. And it's like, they don't ever see the hustle behind that, right? They don't ever see like, okay, this is what's going on. Actually, you only see the mini snippets of it on Instagram or whatever, but you don't ever see like the time that it takes to become that good, and what that means to be self-employed is answering that 4 a.m. phone call, that 2 a.m. phone call. It's just, you've got to do that forever. And, you know, while you're in that industry, and sometimes it's 40 years, sometimes it's longer, but average is 21. Now, 21 years.
I mean, think about AI and how that might replace people, right? Yeah. So whereas I'm a great writer, that was a huge benefit, a strong benefit in my career, in my industry, and my side of things, can now be replaced by AI. So someone who have better systems is going to be more successful because they have a robot doing the job that I've always been unbelievable at doing.
Good point. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. We'll get an AI person on here and have them talk about it.
Yeah.
Grill it. I know one. So do you.
ChatGPT.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this. I know that it's probably out of your comfort zone to be on a camera.
Absolutely. I mean, the benefit of self-employment is that I can wear like, college sweatshirt and, be sitting in my home and all of those things. Yeah. There are definitely strengths if I didn't hit it up on the positives.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate your time today. Thanks for jumping here with me. I'll call you later.
Thanks, Julia.
Bye.
Bye.